Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Small Bites with Lindz. I'm super stoked for today's episode, Seasons of Change, with our fabulous guest host, Dr. Cathy Hunter. Hi, Cathy.
Hello, Lindsay. This is awesome. Thank you for that warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm super excited to get some insight from you. And I know that you have recently released a book, and that's talked a lot about your life and your experiences. And I read a lot of the reviews, and a lot of people said they just felt so much joy and that it was very clear and straightforward of a book. And it wasn't kind of like these made up hacks on how to, live a better life. It was just kind of blunt in a good way.
Awesome. I love that.
Awesome, awesome. So, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, as Lindsay said, my name's Dr. Cathy Hunter. I'm actually a chiropractor. That's where the doctor comes from. This is my 27th year, so you can do the math. I'm older. Anyway, and I've been very privileged because I really never thought I'd practice more than 10 years. So, as I've said, I've tried to run away sometimes from chiropractic. It always came and found me because I really realized my whole purpose here on this earth is to help people. And the book that Lindsay's talking about is literally something that I have been working on in some iteration for over 20 years. And a big part was just doing it, And the good thing is, since it took so long to do, I got to share my life experience, which, we all have our ups and downs. And really, I learned in my practice that it's not just about the chiropractic that's doing the healing. It's so much more. It's about attitude and energy and also advice. And I think that really, really hit me during COVID, where people would come in and yeah, they were hurting physically, but they were also hurting emotionally. And to be there for them, that was a big part of healing. So I've learned in my whole journey that I'm here to help people. I'm here to help them heal themselves. I always say I'm the intermediary. I'm not causing the healing. I'm just here to remove the obstacles. And in my office, it's chiropractic, but in the world, to people I would maybe never meet, it's online, it's my podcast, it's my book. So here I am.
Awesome. That is lovely. And I really get that as I like that you said you were the intermediary to the healing. It's almost like I've realized with a lot of people I've come in contact with that you're holding this container of space where people feel safe and supported in order to heal. So that's really cool.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I'm going to steal that. I like that.
Ooh, yes. So I was wondering, were you always interested in a holistic health approach, or was there an event in your life that turned you into focusing on this?
There was an event. I guess looking back, there were a few events, but I grew up pretty typical of someone born in the 70s where, both parents worked and latchkey kids, and you were left pretty independent and you ate whatever was on the table. And, I was just very fortunate. I was very active, so I was always fit. And I think the first event for me was my father passed away when I was 9. And it was complications of colon cancer sort of thing. He actually died of a cardiac arrest, but he was 41. And, my mom to be left with that. And again, I don't think maybe I thought this in my head at the time, but that was like the first clue, like take care of yourself, you know?
Right.
And then when I was in high school, I was in track and cross country and running and very, very involved varsity for spring track, winter track, and cross country. And I got hurt. And my coaches freaked and they took me to the medical doctor and they took x-rays. And the doctor said to my coaches, I don't think she can handle the pressure of being at the top of the team. And they kind of just left me like that.
Oh,
And it was devastating because that was my world. And that got me on my journey to chiropractic. And I got introduced to a chiropractor from my brother, who was about as unhealthy as they come, but he was going for a car accident. And I went to this guy, and I always say he saved my running career for whatever that means, because I still run today, but also he got me into something that became a career for me. So it was those events. And, looking at my family, in general, not the healthiest for many, many reasons. Somehow they move on. They keep living their lives, but I wouldn't say it's more, they're back east. When you live in California, it's just very different here.
Oh,
We have a lot more access. It's commonplace to say, "Oh yeah, who's your chiropractor and who's your trainer and who's your," it's not the same. So I think those two first events, again, maybe at those ages, I couldn't tell you that's what turned it. But now looking back, they were totally those turning points. And then it's always been a journey for me to live a great physical life, mental life, emotional life, which can have its challenges, as we all know.
absolutely. That's amazing. I think it's really cool to look back on life and see that not a great or terrible experience really has ultimately shaped something great.
Right. And you can look back in your life and, like I always say, life is working for you. Even
Yeah.
when it looks like it's not. It really is it's working for you. And when you can get to that wisdom era in your life, which doesn't mean you have to be older. It just helps. And you look back at those times in your life, you realize they had to happen to get you to the place you are.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's why you're able to help people because you're drawing from this life experience. And sometimes drawing from pain and hurt is relatable.
Absolutely.
If
Yeah.
you haven't been anything through anything in life, it's hard for people to feel like you get where they're coming from.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think maybe that's why we have these lessons, if you will. It's to help other people. Some people don't realize that or never get to that point. And I'm not saying you have to be a doctor or a trainer or some sort of healer. It's just can be just talking to someone at the grocery store. I know
Yeah.
that sounds so small, but it's big sometimes to people.
Yes, absolutely. I know I've heard that kind of like cliche statement, but it's very true because I always think of it in the reverse when they're like, all you got to do is smile at someone at the grocery store, right? Which not many people smile at you in LA at the grocery store, but they frown at you and that makes you feel sad. So you have to think, oh, it is true. If someone smiled at me just to be nice.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Right. Well, you need to come a little north in Ventura County because people smile more.
I mean, everyone's in a rush in LA.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I was also wondering what then led you to write the book itself. And I know that you were saying it's been basically like a 20-year process and then it came down to just doing it. Like, was there something that struck you or just like finding the motivation?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a combination of that. It was one of those points in your life where you're like, okay, if I keep talking about this and I don't do it, like, shut up. Like, it's, poop or get off the pot.
Right.
Either you're going to do it or you're going to shut up about it and be cool with it. And I wasn't cool with it. I needed to finalize, I needed to follow through. And again, insert COVID. So we're home and we're still working, but we're home a lot. And my husband was working on other stuff he was doing, his little projects. And we both kind of agreed, okay, we're going to go into our office at night and we're going to work for at least an hour every night. And we did that for several weeks. And I followed, other books I had read on writing books. Again, I'm not here as a Pulitzer Prize winner. I'm not saying I couldn't be per se, but that's not was the point in the book. The point was to get it done.
Yeah.
And I just busted it out. And it was hard. I mean, it was really hard. And partly because I had never done it, but also because it was personal experience and trying to relay it properly. And I wasn't necessarily afraid of the vulnerability because in my office I'm very much myself. Yeah, okay, I'm the chiropractor, I'm the doctor, but I'm also Cathy in there. I'm not some higher up. So I relate to people like that because I think it's important. I'm not better than anyone else. And I don't like when other people do that to me. But just getting it from your head through your hands into the computer, because I didn't handwrite it, it was challenging. So then it became like a game, like, okay, now we're in it. We need to have it done. And I don't know what was harder, the actual writing of the book or figuring out Amazon self-publishing. I'm not quite sure. It might be neck and neck. I think for the second one I'm working on, I will be way better. But oh my God, Lindsay, it was so, that was almost like I almost said, you know what, screw it. And my niece was like, oh my God, you finished this book. You have to. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, YouTube, sure, all the videos, I'm not helpless, but whew, now that we're done with that. But yeah, so it was one of those things like this is the time. And then I had the extra time because of COVID.
Yeah. I have also experienced quite difficulty with that company trying to publish stuff, so I can completely relate.
You get it. Yeah. So good. It's not just me. Okay.
Very funny. And then something else you said that I think is really admirable, and another reason that you can be seen as a healer is vulnerability, because I think a lot of times vulnerability is seen as weakness. And it's actually one of the strongest qualities you can have. Absolutely. Because how scary is it to be vulnerable? And I think that allows people then to open up to you and heal. Because
Yeah, that's a great point. And it was interesting when I was writing the book. I- You know, I love what you said about the hacks, the made up hacks. That cracked me up because it's so true. My little points in there are very logical. I took like one logic class in college, and it impressed upon me so much. I love it because I think of everything in like logic trees. When I'm making decisions and stuff, that's like all I remember. And so when I was writing the book, there is at the end, 5 pillars of how to make a decision and follow it through. And sure, you still have to do the work. And to me, it's very simplistic. But again, maybe something that's simple to me because I've done it so much is helpful to someone else. But then for like the meat and potatoes in there, I was deciding what subjects, what areas of my life I wanted to talk about. And I knew running definitely had to be one of them because what I shared with you with the chiropractor and changing my trajectory, what I wanted to be in life, that was huge. And the fact I still run and get all the benefits from it. But then I didn't know what else to put in there. And one of them was about my divorce. And I didn't want to put it in there because it was gross. It was bad. It was really bad. And I definitely have shared that with people, but I don't know. It wasn't like I was hiding. It was just weird. Thank God I had gotten already to a point because it had been many years that when you talk about something like that, it feels like just a story. You're not emotionally charged about it. But I don't know. I thought it would bring something negative. And one of my besties and my running partner, we were talking about it one day on her run, and she said, "Oh my God, Cathy, you have to talk about that." And it's interesting, people who have gone through divorce or something similar, they bring up, if they read my book, that, and they say, "Oh my God, I felt that way. Thanks for sharing." And I think with the vulnerable, I put in there that was one of the lowest points in my life. And people like didn't even know that was something I experienced because
right.
I generally tend to be positive, and it's like, "Oh no, that was bad." you
Oh,
know?
yeah.
Yeah. But that was interesting, like picking the topics. The third one I picked was when I stopped drinking alcohol. And that's turned out to be definitely one of the best things I've ever done. And with the book, where I've gone so far to do my book signings have been at non-alcoholic bars and non-alcoholic breweries. And it's been awesome because like sharing just that one aspect of the book, so many people can connect with that. And yeah, it's been very humbling. I'll say that because it was pretty easy for me to quit, and I know it's not that easy for other people.
Right. So, who do you think would be like the ideal reader for this as far as genre or self-help, I suppose?
Yeah, I would say self-help, motivation, inspiration, maybe anyone that is in some sort of season of change. I think it's relatable to anyone maybe over 20. I could be a little out of touch, but definitely an adult, but definitely someone that maybe wants to do something and can't really pull the trigger, or maybe they're just kind of flailing in terms of their path in life and they don't really know where to go, because it's just an example of what I did. But, I'm living proof. And I always say, if I can do it, my God, you can do it in your terms, whatever that means to you.
Love that. That's great. And then I'm following up for someone feeling stuck, which is kind of like the person that you just maybe described, feeling stuck or lost, which I feel like we all do in different parts of our life. Is there a suggestion that you have that comes to mind to help someone get out of a rut?
Yes. And I get into this in the very beginning of the book. And the biggest thing I find with people, and really any age, when they're stuck, it's mainly because they can't really decide what they want. And you have to figure that out first. And I even talk about in my book, sit down, take a piece of paper, don't have your computer, don't have your phone, don't have your tablet, and just sit and just free write possibilities, and don't be judgmental. You want to be an astronaut, sure, who cares, like just write it down, because I think maybe in society we're so kind of looked down upon about these big dreams. When we're kids, right, you do anything, like I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a doctor, I want to work at Starbucks. That's what my 4.5-year-old friend daughter said. I want to work at Starbucks. I'm like, that's awesome. Which it is, because I'll get coffee anyway. But just first figure out what you want and know that can change at any time. And guess what? That's okay. So I think it's just like you said about keeping a space in healing. It's like keeping a space for yourself to give yourself permission to dream, give yourself permission that it's not just dreaming, like this actually, because you are putting it to the paper, you can make that come true, but you have to first decide on it. And yeah, in the whole, my book, 5 Degrees to Your Future, your life is constantly this 5 degrees or more. You get off path, you come back on, you swing over here, you come back on. I mean, that's just life. So figuring out what you want first, you got to have a starting point. If you don't have a starting point, forget it. And I think we're just hounded with information nowadays from everywhere. Sometimes you just have to go back to the basics and start.
That is good advice. I love that. I'm writing it down.
I do it every Sunday.
Basics and start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of simplifying, and I talk about this a lot on this podcast because I'm like 30 years old. I'm in the social media world, not just for business, but like as someone who's 30 in 2024.
Right.
And it's like every time you're online, it's all this it's like it becomes nonsensical. It's so much advice about these crazy routines and these workouts and this way you should eat. And it's just like it's too much input
Right.
that it's overwhelming, and then I think sometimes that makes people freeze and not even do anything because it's too much to start or even really ever get to. So I like the idea of simplifying, taking a piece of paper out and writing stuff down, seeing what comes to mind, and really getting back in touch with yourself. I
Yeah.
find that's really helpful when I take a break of media and phone and everything. I'm going, what's actually going on underneath the surface with me, not what's all out in the outside world. And that helps me make better decisions and see a clearer path.
I mean,
For
that's huge. That's, I feel like being self-aware, you're constantly bringing yourself back to that, because you are bombarded all day with everything else. So that's a great insight.
Thank you. It took a bit to find that, but I feel happier when I've been able to balance, not I never was obsessive with social media, and I'm really grateful for that, but I can only imagine people my age and even younger because it's only become more and more that has just got to be it's
No, I
not
can't
good for
imagine.
your mental health. It's
No,
just
it's
so
not. And okay, so I'm 54. Literally, I'm the last generation that we didn't have any of that. I mean, when I was in middle school, freshman in high school, I got a Commodore 64 computer and I loved it. And I would play a lot of games, but I would make little programs. And when I was in college, they just came out with the first Mac to
Wow.
work on. And that was literally just word processing. I mean, I sound like I'm 100, but if you think about, but you know what I mean? That wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't.
You know, it's wild. And when I was in chiropractic school, we had something called Pine Mail come out, which was like the precursor to email. And it was almost like an instant chat with like a green screen. And I used to leave this one class because we had computers in the library to go do Pine Mail with my friend.
Oh
And
my
that
gosh.
was okay. I graduated chiropractic school in 1997. So say maybe that was 1995 and we're almost in 2025. That's not that long ago.
Yeah.
But I didn't have that growing up. So, like you said, I totally resound with that. I can't even imagine. Probably a good thing we didn't have social media because we'd probably, a lot of us, be in trouble. But, you know, we were running wild. We were really that last running wild and nobody was looking, you know. We came out alive. And my friends will back it up. Like, thank God we didn't have that. But it is a distraction. It can be a wonderful thing, as we know. That's how I found you. Um, on
Like,
YouTube. Yeah. And it was wonderful. I'm like, I must know this woman. She's amazing. But you know, it's also the flip side. Like you said, you get all these other things and you get outside of yourself. So that's wonderful to just bring it back.
absolutely. So I have a final question for you. This is something I personally have been thinking about a lot. One thing I have such a problem with trying to give a client or even someone on YouTube who asks me questions about like lifestyle, fitness, or diet routine. The reason it's hard for me to give advice on that is because everyone's coming from a different place and a different struggle. And then I'll also say on my end, like I'm noticing so much has changed for me in the last 10 years. Like I'm not who I was at 20. I'm now like married and we have a house and I have two different kinds of businesses. So there's like a lot of moving parts, whereas now some of my friends are moms. It's like, I don't understand how like a routine can really work for everyone. So something that I'm trying to explain in these podcasts is try it, see if it works for you, but then maybe let it go if it doesn't and figure out what works for you. And that goes with also that you're going to have to change your routines as the seasons of your life change. Like you're not the same
Absolutely.
person even a year ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, something's new. And
Yeah,
what do
that's
you
great.
have any thoughts on that?
Interesting. I was reading an article specifically this morning about I hate the word diets, but for lack of a better
Right.
word. And the doctor was going on about, even though there's wonderful things you can do, intermittent fasting, low carb, keto, all these different ways to eat, um, it goes down to individual. And I was actually a little shocked this doctor said it because I mean, I thought it was awesome, but it made me think about things, and even for myself, what I've changed in the last couple of years. But I think what you said is perfect. You know, bottom line is, if someone wants to say talk about nutrition, and it is so individualized, right? The bottom line is, stop eating processed foods.
Right.
If you can just go with that, you are going to lose weight. Like you just are. You know, you're going to feel better. You know, cut out sugar. I get it. It's hard sometimes, but you know, do a challenge, do a week challenge, do something like that, see how you feel. So, you have to, and that's what I like about doing consistency with something, and then you see cumulative effects. So, okay, Lindsay, stop eating sugar. And you're like, okay, well, how do you know how you feel unless you really do it more than one day?
Right.
So it's tracking that. And I used to hate tracking, but now I understand why. So, okay, say a client wants to lose weight, whatever. Okay, do you eat a lot of sugar, sweets? Oh, yeah, I eat a lot of that. Okay, so for the first week, you're going to basically try to go down to almost zero. And then you got to do it consistently, 30 days minimal. So I think individually letting people set minimal goals, like in terms of time, to see how they feel, because the way I eat may make someone else feel terrible and vice versa. You know, I mean, oh my God, I have friends that are carnivore diet, and that's awesome. I don't eat meat. It makes me sick to my stomach thinking to eat like that. But they look great. Their labs are great. They feel great. But my labs are great and I feel great,
Right.
So it's really, you have to test it out. If you don't test it out, and like you said with workout routines, as you age, as you change, as you become a mom, all these things, as you're busy, you have to be able to adapt. And the only way to do it is to change it up, give it 30 days, see how you feel. Okay, give it another 30 days. If you're not feeling good after those 30 days, maybe you do need to change what you're doing for exercise.
I love that. That is a great point.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to have to see how I can apply that. Good advice. So, where can everyone find you and find your book? And if you guys, she's going to tell you right now, but I'm also going to plug it in the description below so you can just click it.
Thank you. You can find my book, 5 Degrees to Your Future. It's on Amazon under Dr. Cathy Hunter. And then my podcast, it's on iTunes and Spotify. It is The 5 Degrees to Your Future. But for some reason, if you just put in my name, Dr. Cathy Hunter, it will come up much quicker. Don't ask. I don't know. So yeah, right now, just the paperback version of the book is on Amazon. I don't have it digital yet. That's the
Okay.
next step. But yeah, Amazon, and then also iTunes or Spotify.
Okay.
Oh, and then Instagram is at Cathy Hunter Glover.
Okay. And I will put all of this in the description below so it's just easy to copy, paste, or click.
Thank you.
Well, Cathy, thank you so much for joining me today for this awesome conversation. And guys, I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode of Seasons of Change. And if you have any thoughts or feedback, we'd love to hear it in the comments. I would love if you would subscribe to the podcast and the channel. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.